Here's a new video which will be about the second part of the lesson called Urban Trends and Issues. And in this second part, we start speaking about the challenges that megacities are faced with. Of course, because the lesson will focus on a couple of examples taken from megacities all over the world, it will leave behind most of the existing cities in the world, the smaller ones. Keep in mind that in megacities everything will be bigger. The city is bigger, population is bigger, and so are the opportunities that urban life provide and the problems of urban life as well. The first point will be about this very interesting characteristic of megacities of the south, which is that they are dual cities. This term applies to an extreme form of social polarization. By social polarization, I mean the development of huge inequalities between rich and poor that inside a city may result in extreme forms of separation that we can call segregations. In practice, the rich and the poor absolutely don't share the same experience of the city, even though it should be what urban life is about, that is to say, being all together. I think this picture of Mumbai, of one part of Mumbai, is a good illustration of the term dual city. The two cities that coexist in the same area are very obvious here. You can see in the foreground an informal city. By informal we mean illegal, and so that is the famous pattern of a slum. And in the background here, so separated by the highway, you have a formal city. By formal we mean official, where norms of safety, for example, are guaranteed, where the economic activity is being controlled, where taxes are being raised, etc. And so here we have a clear separation of the two. It does not mean that the situation is always that clear. Most of the time, the two cities are very strongly intermingled, which makes study difficult, but that's how urban geography is, unfortunately. So, first of all, let's have a look at the city of the rich. Even in the poorest countries, you have some very rich people. And so, in the big cities of the poorest countries, you can find some districts where the small part of the population of the city who is very rich will live. Because big cities are attractive, the best areas in a city will often, not to say always, face a problem called gentrification, which is the process when a district becomes particularly attractive to middle-class people and rich people, often when it's being redeveloped. And so the poorer people must leave because the price of housing becomes too expensive for them. So it is what happened to most of the rich areas all over the world. They were not always rich. At the scale of a big city like Mumbai, the pattern is rather clear in the sense that if you look at this map, you will see that the distribution of the posh, the better off districts is pretty clear. They are mostly located along the west coast, because this is where the most attractive environment can be found for at least two very clear reasons. The view on the sea, which is something that always makes housing more expensive, and also the question of pollution, because with the wind coming from the west, and it's true in many cities of the Northern Hemisphere, um, the less polluted districts in terms of air pollution would be the westernmost. So it's rather obvious on this map. In terms of landscape, well, I think rich areas all over the world, they all look more or less the same. I believe in the most um, expensive, the most luxurious districts of Mumbai, city life pretty much looks like city life in any very rich area in another city, including cities of the north. Of course, you will find some iconic places, and so for Mumbai, you may speak about these imperial towers in the area of Tardeo, which of course make us think of the World Trade Center of New York City before it was destroyed. And even more famous is the Antilia Tower, which is known as the most expensive house in the world. It's often shown on TV. It's this very modern skyscraper on the right, which is in fact the house of only one man, the richest man in India. In Lagos, Nigeria, you will also find that kind of very rich district, and in particular a modern central business district, a CBD, the place where skyscrapers will be concentrated. Any city of with an economic importance will develop that kind of district, even in a poor like Nigeria. So maybe we've seen on the previous map that the richest areas are also on the coastline here, so at the south of the city. And one thing which is remarkable is that there is a project in Lagos which is supported and largely funded by the local authorities, with a lot of private money, of course, of building a modern CBD on what we call a reclaimed land. That is to say, land gained over the sea. So I've taken a screenshot from Google Map, which shows the construction site of this future project called Eco Atlantic, and you have the picture of what it will look like. So the goal of the Lagos authorities is really to have, even though the city is full of very poor people, a place which will look a little bit like Dubai. In fact, being the Dubai of West Africa is their objective. Regarding the social dimension in the relation between rich and the poor, there is a tendency among the rich all over the world to live in enclosed places that we call gated communities. It is when a couple of streets will be privatized and guarded by fences and gates, and also by some service staff, security staff. You can find that in all of the cities of the world, actually all the big ones, and this is even more important in cities of the south because of the gap that exists between rich and poor then, which is extremely huge. So for security matters, the rich tend to live increasingly in those gated communities. Now, slums. Well, slums are of course extremely important urban areas, very characteristic of the urban areas of the south. One very classical question in urban geography, in English, is to evaluate how much these slums are mostly places of hope or places of despair. Naturally speaking, we would say despair, but things are more complex than they may look like. So, one thing you must understand is that the cities of the south, because of the fast urban growth, are all faced with a housing problem, because it is just impossible to cope with the pace of urban growth. So the newcomers, and the poorest ones in particular, but the poorest are often the newcomers, for them when they arrive in the city, access to formal housing will be extremely difficult. And formal housing, meaning solid housing, will be unaffordable for many people. Moreover, in many countries of the South, governments and local authorities uh, don't have enough time and money to provide enough social housing for all the people that would need that. I mean, even in rich countries, there is not enough social housing for everybody. You remember that social housing means that it's houses that are built and rented at a lower price by the authorities. In fact, so most of the new buildings in the cities are made by private developers, and uh, you may calculate or measure in a way the level of development of a city to the percentage of slums in the housing. The typology that I'm presenting now was found in a British geography book. I think it is a bit caricatural, but it's not useless. Distinction was made in that book between what they called established megacities, so mostly the megacities of the north, which is where informal housing is almost absent. So by informal housing, we mean the slums. Uh, it it will never be totally absent, but you will have, say, less than 5% of the people living in that kind of housing. Then a bit less developed with lower standards of living and economic advancement are maturing megacities. So most megacities of Latin America and also the megacities of China, for instance, would be in that category. Consolidating megacities is where Mumbai would be, is where informal housing is around and possibly below 50%. And the last category, which mostly illustrates the megacities of Africa, will be where informal housing dominates. Clearly, I don't like the term immature megacities, which is well, really patronizing. But well, this typology exists. Now, if you have a quick look at the map, you will see that the trend in absolutely every continent is that slum housing is decreasing in shares. Okay, and that is good news. But if you want to understand that, it is simply the result of economic development. And economic development is happening, and notably has been happening all over the global south since the 90s, so that is not a surprise. It does not mean that the number of people living in slums is decreasing. It is often not decreasing. In fact, in most continents, population growth is so big that in real numbers, the number of slum dwellers all over the world is still increasing.